So my name is Syeda Kauser, and you all can call me Kauser. And I'm a software engineer at LinkedIn. What my team does, what I'm focused on is building infrastructure automation to keep the site up. So I've also added these slides to a bit.ly link, so feel free to download them after the talk. And yeah, so I'll be talking about ways where you can level up your Python code reviews. All right, so the agenda. So I'll be talking about first, why do you even want to do code review? Second, how can you use tooling to improve speed and quality of your reviews? And then how you can integrate that tooling into your current workflow, because that's the main thing, right? How we can make this integration pretty simple. So, cool. So why even do a code review? So I guess taking a step back, for those of you who aren't familiar with a code review, it's basically the process where before you submit your code to the main repository, you have your code reviewed by your peers and you get feedback on it. And given that it is a process, why do we even want to do it, right? So multiple reasons. These are the main benefits that I really like. So the first one is you can find bugs early on. These bugs can be somewhere around, like maybe there's a design flaw, maybe you're not actually performing the business logic that you expect it to perform, things like that. Because we do our best, writing unit tests and doing integration testing, things like that. But there's only so much we can catch on our own, right? And so it helps to have that like second pair of eyes, third pair of eyes on your code. The second thing that I like is you can teach and share knowledge. So what's helpful about this is that when you're onboarding new team members, when you're yourself are joining a new team, code review helps you understand how the team functions, how the code is structured. In addition, and I think more importantly, you can mentor other developers. So this is done through, during reviews, you can send links to docs, suggest best practices, and just learn about design. Personally, I've learned a lot through reading other people's code review and how they do it. So that's super helpful. And the third benefit, which is the part I'm focusing on in this talk, is code review and implementing these using standards and things like that helps maintain consistency in the code base. So now I'm going to get started on the examples. So let's say you want to submit some new feature. Basically, it's going to help you pick your coffee. And so it's all over the place. You have some indentation issues and weird spacing issues and things like that. But let's say you submit it, right? So there's a number of things that we're going to run into issues on. So let's say you submit it for review, you're going to get feedback, fix this indents, fix the space, and it's a lot of back and forth. Not only that, it's kind of wasted cycles on both, the reviewer and you as a submitter to address them. And there's that. In addition, there's also opinions, right? Like people have different opinions about their styles and formatting. And if that isn't already set in stone before the review is even started, it's a lot of like tedious talking about it. And so what's the solution to this? Well, one place to start would be using a style guide. So I definitely recommend folks look at PEP 8 as a good standard to start off with. I know that other companies and projects have their own style guides, so feel free to refer to those as well and pick and tweak to see what fits your team accordingly. It's definitely helpful that your teams do need to agree on the style guide, and that way it'll help maintain consistent styling for your team. So you have a style guide, but what if let's say you have a style guide, you have your code, you don't want to have to constantly go refer to the style guide, back and forth multiple times to make sure you got everything right. So what's out there? Actually, there are multiple linting tools out there. The thing that I really like is using Flake 8. So Flake 8 is a wrapper which checks for PEP 8 compliance against various Python linting tools. And what's awesome about this is that it's a simple command, you run it, and then it displays all the warnings per file. And so let me show you an example. So just heads up about setup, it's super easy. Use pip to install it. You can modify the config if you want to override a default setting. So let's say you want to override max line length for any reason, you can go ahead and do that. So yeah, so on that code snippet, you applied flake 8, you see all these different warnings, and you'll notice that all these warnings have different error codes. So, you know, 300, family of 300 errors are one thing, family of 100 errors are another thing. And this is awesome in the sense that, yes, I now know what issues I have to fix. The bad thing, or not the bad thing, but the tedious thing is like having to go manually fix them. And so, you know, I wish there was a way that, or some auto formatter which would help fix those errors. And there are actually a few out there, right? But I'm going to be talking about the auto formatter called Black. And so this is the Black is basically a highly opinionated code formatter, and it helps. Once this is applied to the code base, you know, before it's submitted for review, it helps for more streamlined reviews just because it's in the same format that you expect. And one thing which I noted here is that Black is a strict subset of PEP 8. If you want to check the docs for more information around that. One example is line length. So for PEP 8, the default line length is 79 characters. For Black, it's 88. And you can always override the settings if your team feels the need to. So just putting it out there. So setting up Black is simple. Again, you can use pip to install it. You can update the config. This is the code before you apply the Black plugin. Again, it's all over the place. I mean, it's fun to pick copy, but it's not really easy to read, right? So then after you see how it formats the file in place, and now everything looks consistent, easy to read, and yeah, so those are the main two tools that I really like. And so I'm going to move on to a different tool. So let's say you have a file, it has multiple imports, and you want to identify them. And you know, you're working in a project, like so many imports, right? How do you get structure around that? So the solution to that is integrating with the isort library. So what's awesome about the isort library is that it alphabetically sorts the imports, and not only alphabetically, but also sorts based on kind of like different, like the section namespace, if that makes sense. So for example, as I've listed here, you have the standard library imports at the top, then you have third-party imports, and then you have your own project imports, etc., because you can always configure the import order differently in the config, and this helps with readability of the file. So again, you can use pip to install it. I just made a super simple config right there, but again, you can always update it accordingly to your projects. And so before you apply isort, you see how it's, I mean, I only put 4 here for brevity, but you can, as you might know, working on big projects, you have like so many imports. And so it's kind of all over the place. And then after you apply isort, you can see that they're in a structured order, you know, standard library at the top, third-party library in the middle, and if you were to have your own, you know, library, it would be at the bottom. So this is awesome. You know, you have Flake8, Black, and isort, and although it's cool to apply these on the code, it's kind of hard to remember to apply them like one by one every single time you want to commit code to the code base, and that can also be tedious too, right? So how can we integrate all these different plugins and more to our code before we even commit, even before we push to the main repository? So there's a super awesome framework to that, which, like, drum roll, but I don't have a drum. So if there's one thing you take away from this, it's going to be the Precommit Framework. So screenshot, start, whatever. I recommend you all have use the Precommit Framework in your projects. So this is how you can manage installation and execution of each hook, so that basically when you commit, right, before you commit and you have this framework installed, this framework is going to run the plugins against your code. And if the plugin fails for whatever reason, it's going to fail, and it's going to tell you the reason why. And so once you address the violations and you address the reason, why it failed, you recommit. If the commit goes through, then you're set. And once again, this is super important to have, because that way your team can have style consistency and, looking at the same type of code, going through the same plugins. And just a note, I put to apply the Black plugin first and then Flake 8, because I had mentioned earlier Black is a subset of Flake 8. So just, because Flake 8 is going to give you the warnings, but Black will fix them. But I can re-talk about that too if that needs more clarification. So setting up is super simple. So you just have a YAML file. You're going to have your different hooks listed. Once again, these are just a few out there. There's so many out there that I recommend you take a look. And after you have the YAML file created, just go ahead and install the hooks. So I wanted to give a brief example about what happens when it's run. So you have the super simple file, and you add the file, you commit the file, and I wonder what's going to happen next. Going to get this output. So this output basically shows you the effects of running the command. So you see that the Black hook failed. Because it failed, you see a failed thing on the screen, and it reformatted it. ICERT passes, and Flake 8 fails. So Flake 8 you see failed because logging is listed in the file, but it's not being used. And so we don't want that, right? So then what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and remove the import logging line, re-add the code, recommit. And once you recommit, then you're going to see all the hooks have passed, which is awesome, because now this means your code is ready to be committed, and then you can push it to your branch or master branch or whatever you want. So definitely highly encourage you all to take a look at that. And yeah, so definitely key takeaways. Use the Precommit Framework in your projects. And within that Precommit Framework, I recommend you use the plugins Flake 8, Black, and ICERT. And in addition, just if you need some emphasis understanding why this is important, it's so you can have consistent code style in your projects. Less time arguing on styling, syntax, I guess styling, things like that. And you can have more time to talk about, design, what does the code really do, catching bugs, and mentoring. So code review is like a good process to have on your team. And I covered this section of it, but for further reading, I really highly encourage you to take a look at other resources out there. These are my 4 resources that I really liked. So these resources talk about things from how to submit code for review, how to submit that in a way that makes it more productive. These resources also talk about ways that you as a reviewer can be more productive, how to give feedback, how to show empathy when you talk, and having a discussion. So yeah, so once again, thank you so much. And you can download these slides at the link. I'm going to paste it in the chat once I'm done. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions about code review and have a discussion around it, share best practices. I'm open to that. So yeah.